Hello. I was just seeing if somebody was going to tell me I was on mute, and so somebody did. And so thank you, Ashleigh. The bring a leg. Anyway, welcome. This is our first Proudcast Masterclass. This is also the first time that we have the link streaming on LinkedIn, which we'll do for like business-related ones. However, it is not live on LinkedIn, but you can see that link and click it, and you can watch it on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook page, my personal Facebook page as well. And then Ashleigh has it on hers. And who is Ashleigh? Ashleigh is our leading expert in recruiting, who is going to answer any questions that anybody might have for her, but also give us some tips. And we'll talk about some statistics and all that plague the LGBTQIA plus community because it is not pretty in the workplace. And so like the quote said at the beginning, we have enough to deal with in our community at the workplace. We might as well not add a bad interview to it. And so that is why Ashleigh is going to be here today. My co-host, Gemini, is still out due to an unfortunate family incident, and she's dealing with that. And so it is just me and Ashleigh today. So Ashleigh will do the hot topics with me, and the hot topics are 100% Ashleigh related because this is a Masterclass edition. And so let me introduce you now to the fabulous Ashleigh Lynch. Oh, you're muted. Now you're not muted.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name's Ashleigh. I am a professional recruiter for management roles. I've been recruiting for about 14 years. I've recruited for some larger hospitality companies such as Hilton, Disney, as well as, smaller kind of in-house positions as well.
And I met you through HHS.
Yes. We were fortunate enough to work together.
Which is why I know you're amazing. Yeah. So the hot topics today, and usually we just go over any kind of hot topics, is for me the pay discrepancies for the LGBTQIA plus community. And when you look at such a big acronym, because basically everybody but straight cisgendered people are in this acronym. And so when you look at that, it's even diverse in there, but it is alarming. It is very alarming, just like looking, gay men are almost equal. Yeah. And then you have, lesbians are almost equal as well. But then you go down and you'll have, cisgender or trans men and women. Trans men do better than trans women. And then you have like Black trans women, which are at the very bottom. And that is the scary, those are some scary, they're all scary, but it is scary.
Very scary numbers. Being anything other than a white man has not been historically a winning combination. And, the more marginalized your demographic is, unfortunately, those pay differentials, it gets worse. And it really, it's something that needs to be highlighted. I hope it gets highlighted a little bit more. So thank you for using your platform to bring some awareness to these things that this community is dealing with.
Yeah. And so somebody just made a comment. I'm going to ask them, Ryan, I know who you are. I met you, but do you see us on screen? Because when I look at the platforms right now, it still shows like one of them, it shows a countdown. One shows the commercial. Is it showing Ashleigh and I? Because we look at a different screen. Since you said hi, maybe it is showing us, but give me some kind of form of live. Okay. Yes. Okay, good. So we'll just keep on going there. So Ashleigh, when I think about like you and I, who are only like, we're very young. When we think about like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, what we were scared of aren't the same things that we're scared of today. And I think that I see it more that way because of you, because we did another episode together called Surviving the Red Devil about bullying, where I thought, well, hey, this isn't getting better. And you told me, well, yeah, it is, because we're talking about it. Do you still feel that optimism?
I do. Eternal optimism is one of the mental illnesses I suffer from. But just being kind of in my capacity, being able to speak to, when I get jobs coming in, I get the opportunity to get on the phone and have conversations with individuals who aren't used to having conversations about what does a diversity hire for your group mean? What is a diversity miss? What is a culture add versus a culture fit? And all of those go into biases, and everybody has a bias. Actually, Harvard did they have a test that you can take, and it's very quick, and it helps you identify your own preconceived illicit biases, because we all have them. And there's even software to help recruiters take biases out of the recruiting cycle. But there's bias written into the programs because everybody has a bias. So you kind of feel like you're running around in a circle sometimes to make sure that we are setting our candidates up for success and making sure that we are getting qualified individuals, whether they're part of any marginalized community, specifically LGBTQIA community, members that identify with this community deserve to be put in front of hiring roles, in front of these hiring leaders. And, part of this is how to use your recruiter. What is the difference in a conversation with the hiring leader and a recruiter?
What is the difference?
So a recruiter is part of the company, but they are not specifically related to that role, meaning I won't be in your chain of command. You're not going to be working with me every day. I am your ally, and I am also the company's ally. So it's my responsibility to, number one, when I speak to you and we're interviewing, I need to make sure that you're qualified for this role. On paper, because I don't want anybody to walk into a role that they're going to immediately be overwhelmed, overstimulated, and just not prepared for, even if it's where you want your career to progress to. If you get in a role that you're not ready for too quickly, it can just lead to burnout, frustration, and so many different negative things that it might detour your entire career.
You may never try that again, or
right,
you may
because
have a
you just
reputation that you won't get that again.
Yes, absolutely. And you're just like, oh, I'm so burnt out. I'm taking that, a lot of this, call it that midlife crisis, but that mid-career left-hand turn where you're just like, I am done with this industry. And it makes sense. And a lot of people just want to do something new. But going back to that, like, what does your recruiter do? So your recruiter is an advocate for you as a candidate. Once we've had that conversation and I tell you that I'm moving you on, that means you've got me. So if you've got any questions, about benefits, about payroll, holidays, so very much underneath that HR umbrella. But I also have a very intimate peek behind the veil of those operations that are going on. I have an idea of how it's supposed to flow. I know, policies and the culture that the company is behind. So when you have a conversation as a candidate with that hiring leader, and that conversation doesn't align with what I've already told you, that's going to be your first red flag that this might not be the manager for you.
Oh, wow.
Because that hiring manager is going to be a lot more narrow scoped. Whereas your recruiter, the majority, 30 of my 40-hour week is on the phone with candidates. That is my job, is to recruit and to interview. Interviewing and recruiting is an aspect of most executives and management's job. So they're not into that. If you ask
It's just
a
one
hiring
piece.
leader, right, if ask them about what their preconceived biases are, they might not be able to answer that question because they don't know.
But that leads me to a question for you, because
Yes.
I don't talk a lot about my professional stuff here, but I was a vice president working with you, and so I do see a different side of it. And so I do have questions though, because I've never worked in recruiting. Are there quotas? Are there things like that? And I'm sure maybe the answer is yes for some, no for others. But when you think of like police departments, you think, okay, they pull me over at the end of the month because they have to meet a quota. And so you
Yeah.
kind of lose respect for that ticket process, right?
Mhm.
I've always kind of equated the same to recruiting until I met, you and Buddy, which shout out Buddy, retired recruiter. If you're watching, Buddy, love you. So yeah, what is that?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. We are held to our own metrics, and some of those metrics are: how long is it taking us to fill this role? How many candidates are we sending over? Are we sending over diverse candidates? How many open roles do we have? There are kind of a difference. There's two different kinds of recruiters. One's an agency recruiter, and one is a corporate recruiter. So for me personally, I'm a corporate recruiter. So I recruit specifically for one company, and an agency recruiter might recruit for 4 or 6 or 15 different companies, different roles, doing different things. So they don't get paid until that role is filled. But in addition to our quotas, we also are held to metrics of how many of retention, how many of our hires are staying in those roles.
Now that's a
How,
metric we share then.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it's in a very important. So your recruiter is invested as on both sides of it. We want the candidate to be happy with their job because I want them to stay, because that's, that ties back into my money. But, again, we also need to make sure that we're working with that hiring leader on their hiring to make sure that they're hiring the candidates that are going to fit and be that ad that they're looking for, working through their own biases.
Well, you just mentioned your money. And so is it common to have uh, like a system to where you make more, you make commission in that industry in recruiting?
We don't make commission. The
Okay, good.
commission, we like for agency recruiters, they will get a certain percentage of the salary for the role that they're recruiting for. So the
Okay.
the higher roles you recruit for, the higher your commission is. And a lot of these recruiters get into these companies and can recruit for these larger companies for 10, 15, 20 years. And, they have their contracts and all those stuff as well. Because certain times, a lot of times recruiters and hiring managers are misaligned on what it means to be qualified for a role. And that goes back to exactly why we're here,
Yeah.
talking through some of these things. Because as any kind of tenured recruiter is going to be able to walk a candidate where they need to go in order to be successful in an interview. Your hiring leaders probably are not devoting that amount of time to making sure this candidate interviews well, and they shouldn't. It's not their job. It's my job to make sure a candidate is set up for success and is going to succeed when they get in front of that hiring leader.
Very cool. To anyone that is new watching, because this is going through so many platforms, we have no idea until afterwards how many people are watching really, even though I think that there's a ticker up there that is talking about the different platforms. But also that means that I can't see all the questions. And so please type your questions in on our Proudcast Media YouTube, or my Facebook, which is very public. You can do that one, or the Proudcast Facebook tonight. Don't type it into Instagram or any other one, or LinkedIn, because we won't see those here until afterwards. And then we won't have answered your questions.
Or you guys can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share if you've got one-off, circumstances or have a specific question. I'm happy to navigate those
Yeah. So I think, we have a grasp of the job overall and kind of the metrics and everything. But we're here because it's called Proudcast, and we want to kind of focus on the LGBTQIA plus community. And the reasoning is we know that there are discrepancies, like we said earlier.
Yes.
When you look at the workplace, discrimination is a big deal in the community, inside workplaces, and it never actually looks like discrimination. It never says, "Hey, guess what? I'm here to discriminate." It does it in many other ways, and like it incrementally gets you right. And so that
Mhm.
could start. I mean, it would have to statistically sometimes start at recruiting, and
Yeah,
I mean, obviously. And so,
absolutely.
what can without telling any secrets of any company, tell me, like, what are the industry standards that are like catching on, that are kind of checks and balances on that?
So a lot of companies are implementing software, and that is reading through a lot of these resumes for us. And they're really getting in there and being able to do that. It's almost an AI. So we upload the job description, we upload any notes that we've gotten from the hiring leaders about what pain points might be going on and exactly what they're looking for into AI, and it will rate all of our candidates. So then a human goes in and then actually reviews the resumes. And so that's where it's very important to have a strong resume,
What is it rate?
especially.
What is it
Huh?
rating us on?
It's going to rate it on what we've uploaded it and told it that we're looking for. So the job description, and then like if I've got a manager saying, well, this is really a a management position, but it's a multi-site management position, or
It's a
we're
back
dealing with,
chat. It's
we're dealing with a location that is really remote, and it's a huge Cajun demographic, or it's a huge Polynesian demographic. So then I'm, navigating, looking towards specific demographics and kind of
okay.
niche positions, so you can really be as broad or narrow with the instructions into it. But then what it does is it basically rates all of the candidates into an A, B, C, D category. And then that's when your recruiter is going to hit those. And the first ones they're going to look at are those A's, and then the B's. So that gets us kind of, right into those resumes. And very important to have a strong resume. If not every company uses AI, but some of them do. And if you want to get into that A, there's a couple kind of insider tips that can make sure that your resume is in that A or that B category, even if you're not completely aligning with all of the qualifications in the job.
Okay. So that brings me to some more questions, but first I wanted to look at some statistics here. And so I will just pull this up. I have it above your head right now, which makes sense, but let me pull it up this way. It'll cover us both up. So this says 41% of 18 to 25-year-olds, which are like the most ambitious, went back into the closet when they started their first job. That is alarming. So that's scary. 3/4 of people who identify as LGBT plus, I forgot the QIA, have hidden their sexual orientation, gender identity at least once at work. More than half were not out because they fear discrimination. And then 1 in 5 say that being open about their sexual orientation, gender identity is the hardest thing they've ever had to do. Now, we know that more Americans identify within the big acronym, is what I call it, than ever before. And so, when we were always growing up, we were told it's this percent of the population. Well, it is bigger now.
Yeah.
And it's by far because of bisexuals, or at least that's what they identify with. A lot of people do that in the beginning, or that's what they'll publicly identify with. But that is scary. For transgenders, and I, there's there's name issues, there's whatever. I heard the suggestion that somebody had said, well, you should go back to presenting a certain way until you get employed. And I looked at that person. I said, why would you ever do that? No, don't do that. Now, luckily that person is happily employed today. But that is scary, because if I hadn't been there to say that to that person, if I hadn't said, no, that's a bad idea, why would that person that told you that, no, I mean,
Yeah.
they would have done it. I would imagine more people do it than don't do it. And you're the gatekeeper to that. That's no small, weight on your shoulders, right? And you mentioned earlier that we were talking about the next level, which would be like the vice president or whoever's in the hiring manager. Those characters are so diverse in what they need. How do you manage those relationships? I know how you personally do it, but what is the industry standard on it? And what works, what doesn't work? And yeah.
So I think my very first default, what I want to get out into everybody is that you are qualified and worthy of a good job. And part of that is being able to show up as your true, authentic selves. So my advice, if you feel like your sexuality is something that you want to address, do it, and you can really gauge whether or not you want to be a part of that company and that culture by the reactions that you're going to get. Now, I don't recommend going for, the shock value. Don't, maybe don't show up and just, if you're trans, don't show up in, fur coats and just very bright.
Unless that's how you normally do.
Unless that's how you normally dress.
Don't do it for the shock. And I'm glad you said that, because I literally get irritated when I know that's not you. I know this is not how you act, but you're doing this here for that. This is how I act. This is who I am. You get this every single day. So if that's a shock to you, you're just gonna have to deal with it. But if I were to, just to shock you, come out here with a buzz cut and spiky hair, that would not be appropriate.
Right. Because you're not being your true, authentic self. And in the words of the great Brene Brown, the opposite of fitting in is being yourself. It's not so. We don't want to fit in. You don't ever want to change yourself to fit in.
So boring.
Anywhere. It's so boring, because then you get a group of people who are all exactly the same, and then just that's no fun. And it's no
corporate America.
Yeah, right. You get corporate America, and then you get the situation we're in now, which is just, business structures that are no longer relevant.
Right.
In the current, but just some of the ways to overcome those biases are just, I really think, is prepare yourself. Even though it's illegal, you may still get asked some biased questions during the interviews. Think about those. Be prepared to answer questions about your marital status or family plans in a professional way, but also be prepared to deflect. We can reroute a conversation really easily with a few focusing things. And you could say, you know what, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I was just having a conversation the other day, and I really feel like my communication skills would be such a benefit. And let me tell you why. So I've already skirted that question that you've asked me and got into a way that I'm going to benefit the company.
It almost sounds, ma'am, like you were a really good politician there, because if you want some lessons in how to deflect that, you can either look at corporate leaders, because they do that a lot. They are politicians. Let's not play. And that I love politics. One reason I enjoyed it, but that is very true. So would you say, and it's not wrong to say, no, this is a boundary, you can't ask me that, but is it better to do what you just said? Or, I mean, which one? Because you run the risk anytime of offending a recruiter, and what offends you today might not offend you tomorrow. We never know what's going on in somebody's day. What happens when we offend a recruiter?
So it's really tough to offend a recruiter. We are masters at no, at taking. We have to give out no every day. We have to take no every day. So no isn't necessarily a bad word when it comes
No?
to us. And part of your recruiter's job is to push. I push back on my candidates. I push on my hiring leaders, especially, most of that push comes when we get to that compensation, conversation. And I push my recruiters if they're like, well, I'm really comfortable at this dollar amount or this dollar amount. And that's when I have to say, well, when we first talked, you were looking at a better work-life balance. This is taking you out of those 17-hour days. It's about 40 miles closer to your house round trip. So how much do those mean to you? Like, is that equivalent to like that $3,000 to $4,000 that we're talking about here? And it's the same for those hiring leaders. If they're like, well, they don't fit 2 or 3 of these skills that I'm looking for. Okay, well, what are those skills worth to you? Is this a position that you don't have the capacity to train for? And they really don't like that, because that's part of their role, is training and developing a team. So but we all know that corporations like to put a lot on our plate, management and that trickle down effect.
Right.
So it's that catch-22 of being able to take that pushback. So I enjoy when a candidate questions me. And that is actually, you've just highlighted, I think, another tip on my interview.
Yeah.
Is go to the website. And, a lot of companies, forward thinking companies, will also have on their website if they have any employee resource groups,
Yep.
if they have any diversity and inclusion groups, any diversity and inclusion initiatives. And that is something that you can ask your recruiter, and that's not offensive. And I would just say, what are some of the values that, on your website, it shows that some of your values are supporting team member development and supporting these things. What kind of educational or employment opportunities do you offer?
So I've got some follow-up to the last point and now this one. So I'm going to jump in for a second.
Yeah.
I think that to the last point, like I know you, and so that relationship between the executive and the head recruiter was important, and it makes you successful. So just open and honest, like, hey, this might not fit here, but this would fit over here, and that flexibility always worked. And I always tell this story of actually Buddy, and you've heard this a million times, because there was a candidate one time that turned me down for a director role. And the candidate, Buddy, said, why, Allison? Don't accept that. You go tell them, because they had a passion for being a chef. And don't accept that, because tell them, hey, you still get to do this. You get to control that, and you still get to do these aspects, and it'll be even better. And because he told me not to give up on it, we're busy. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you said no, move on. I said, okay, cool. And so I went back and I convinced that person to work for me. And after that, I saw every single role that I hired somebody as like, I have to interview with them, as in they're interviewing me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that found me a lot of success there. And with that, and that person actually took the job, got a promotion. I think is getting another promotion now, all within like a year and a half, 2 years. But I found that strategy so useful. I went to one site in Wyoming, and I just said, hey, you don't trust me? You don't know me? Ask me, what do you want to do? And that person like is probably one of my favorite working relationships ever now, because she interviewed me. Do you ever feel like you are also being interviewed?
100%. And I feel like the interview starts at hello. When whether we're on a video chat, which always has that extra layer of ick to it, your recruiter knows that. Again, I got news for you, whether it's on video or phone, we're nervous too. Even though we may
Why are you
have phone
nervous?
calls 7, 8, 10 times a day, we're nervous. We don't know the candidate that we're going to get. Is it somebody? So when I say the interview starts at hello, when I say, Hi, Allison. It's Ashley. I'm calling because I have this time scheduled for us to talk about this. Everybody makes fun of us because we always ask, is now still a good time? But we ask that because a lot of times I've been hit with, actually, I just got in a fender bender. The cops here. Can I reschedule? Absolutely. Or, you know what? My daughter got sick. We're in the doctor's office. Can I reschedule? Absolutely. Like, we understand things come up in the minute that you might not have advance notice to be able to cancel and reschedule.
It is almost like you just walked me into this question, and this is the biggest one I had for you. What if the way that they are acting in an interview, what if their irritation, if they're short, we always say we never know what's going on in somebody's day, but what if they're that way not because of one fender bender, because of 20 fender benders, because they've been through 30 interviews, because they've been discriminated on, because they've been let go, because they've been treated so unfair, which, you notice that you can go from being I'm going to say it, a happy gay person to a bitter and a sassy gay person. And one is great, one is funny. Like, they're both like, and that is just progression. But you get there, I'm noticing as I get older, for a reason. Right. So how do you notice that? And do you give any, is there any leeway given to that? Or is it just a no, you should have known better?
So I guess it's a little twofold because it helps me. Part of our strategy is overcoming adversity. If I'm having a horrible day, that doesn't mean the world stops. It means the world can maybe have an empathetic ear to what I'm going through and bend and ebb with me, or it could not. I could have said, hey, my kids are homesick. I can't reschedule this interview. And the hiring or the recruiter's like, this is our last day interviewing. Like, everybody's got to be sent over. I don't mind if your child's screaming in the background, if you can get through it. Like, that's your opportunity to say absolutely. And if you can stay focused and engaged in a interview with chaos ensuing,
you can run a kitchen, you can
get around a kitchen, any kind of operate like overcoming adversity is expert level, in my opinion, because you were dealt with some strife and strategic thinking of, I'm in really bad cell service. This is what's, we'll work with you. Reschedule, really, really try to not reschedule an interview more than once. Very nice.
What do you think about like a million interviews? And I know because people can tell you we're doing this right now. They can get stuff from this and know what to say to get past the first round, right? If somebody is not as engaged as you. And so I understand why there are so many interviews, right? Yes. Because we want to make sure that we get it. But at what point is it too much? Are there people that notice that? Are there metrics out there? And is there any data? Corporate has all this data. Is there any data to say that, like, if you string it out this long, that person's going to go either hungry, they're going to go find something else. At a certain level, they could go get a job at McDonald's today and make money, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. My biggest thing for the hiring leaders is just to remind them, hey, if they're applying here, they're applying and interviewing somewhere else as well. So you're not only competing for them, you're competing with other companies. You're competing with your competition for this candidate. So those are a lot of things that we do need to keep in mind. And I do want to just encourage everybody, even though it's interviewing is very nerve-wracking and it's scary. You are in the driver's seat and you are interviewing, like you said, the recruiter, as much as that recruiter is interviewing you. One of my big tips is before your interview, go to the website and just, we hit it before. You can look and see how they align with your values, but also see if they post any other things that you can just ask a question about. Hey, like, I read this on your website. Can you tell me more about that program? Or
where do you check up on to see if that is accurate? Just like an applicant can lie, an applicant can face forward, so can a company. You go to look at some of these websites, they all look the same, right? They all talk about DEI. Yeah. And so how do we as the consumer here, basically, we're applying, whatever. How do we know that is real? So where's the check and balance? And what
Yeah, absolutely. I have had candidates say, when was the last time your business took an employee feedback survey and put it into a direct incentive?
hopefully you hired that person. That was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Of your bonus eligible positions, how many bonuses got paid out? What ratio of bonus eligible to bonus payments did it happen?
What
Because
are the
they're wanting to
metrics?
know. Yeah, and we can say you're bonus eligible, but are we putting in realistic, markers in there to get your bonus? Are you having to fight for your bonus? Those types of things. So yeah, and it is. Recruiters, we are very loyal to our company. However, we also move companies a lot. Like I said, I've worked for Hilton, I've worked for Disney, worked with HHS. So, and all of those businesses are different. So we have a network. I have a network of managers that I've worked with. I have a network of employees that I work with. So
I've never thought about that. I've thought about like the VP or a director or even like a general manager in a town. Well, oh my gosh, they can bring me, if they're coming over to the Burger King, they can bring me everybody from that Burger King to work at this McDonald's.
yeah.
But I've never thought of the recruiter having that network.
So our network is, we got a very far reach, very far and very wide of a lot of very, different industries, depending on the recruiter and where they've came from. So, and when you start thinking about those crossover skills, those soft skills that you can take if you're transitioning from one industry to another, what are some of the things? That. Yeah, well, I mean, project management. Right. Yeah. Right. So we think
that was the LGBT. I'm a trans woman. So that was the joke, not about.
No. Oh my gosh. I totally missed it. So, I'm not going to pick up on it. But yeah, absolutely.
So, but where do you go to look at that? So you can listen to, I mean, you can ask people that work there. You can ask the recruiter. I don't like to go look at places like, let's say, what is that? Oh my gosh.
Like
not Google, but no, what's the one for like consumers that people would really know? What? Oh my gosh, I know what it is. Like it's where everybody complains about a restaurant.
Like Yelp.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like Yelp. Yelp is where I don't look at Yelp because I know that Yelp is a bitch fest. And excuse my language. And is there a version of that for the corporate world?
There is.
It's not fair.
It's called Glassdoor, and it's also Fishbowl. But again, it's the upset. It's the ones who had a bad experience. If you've had a good experience, odds are you're not gonna write anywhere about it. You're gonna keep your network and keep it professional and go on with your professional career.
So that's a great. Yes. And so like in restaurants a long time ago, Chili's stopped looking at, I don't know what they do now, but they stopped looking at, were you satisfied? Did you have a good time? The most important question there was, do you have an intent to return? Yeah. And that's hard to equate to some industries, but maybe it's not. Would you work here again? And is that question asked?
Yeah. So
they ask the employer.
It should be. But that's some of the good things that like LinkedIn is for. You can go to LinkedIn and go to that employment page, and it'll tell you of your connections, how many connections you have that's worked for that company. So then
do people take those down? Like how many people go through their friend list?
No, it's like, so if it's on your resume, it's on HHS's career page.
Oh, okay.
So like you and I are connected on LinkedIn. If I went to HHS's career page, it would show that I have a mutual connection that worked there. So then I can reach out to you and just say, hey, Allison, I saw this position about HHS. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with them?
Nice.
And yeah, so people do that a lot. So, those are wonderful ways because as a recruiter, like I'm here to smile and sell you the company and sell you excitement. Like we were touched on it earlier. It starts from hello. So if I'm like, hi, I'm Ashleigh, and you're just like, hi, Ashleigh. I'm just like, I want to, hey, Ashleigh, I'm so excited to connect. How are you today? Like, that's the energy that we're trying to do during these interviews.
You need to ask Buddy who he says was his best interview of all time.
I'm sure he would say you all day, every day. Was it Buddy or Sean that hired you?
Oh my God, it was Sean. And earlier I meant to say Sean. Sean, if you're watching, I'm so sorry. Buddy has not retired. Sean retired. Oh my gosh.
Is that right? They're related, so it's fine.
I mean, they're the same person after a while. You morph
Pretty
together.
much, yeah.
So speaking specifically to the Pride community, what does it look like if you think, if you have a family to feed, right? And sometimes you're in a situation. If you don't think that is a safe environment for somebody, do you still bring them into it? Because you have to show that you're bringing in people that are marginalized in some of these quota systems. I mean, how do you approach that? And like, what, because you're either not feeding them, like you're not feeding you, like what, sometimes it's easier to feed everybody and just like, well, they're going to learn that later, or like the company's going to learn that's not a good person later. Like you said earlier, if they're not qualified, they're not qualified.
Right. But what do I do if they are qualified, but maybe didn't interview well?
So what do you do? Like, where does your morals come into that? And do you see, I mean, is everybody like you and Sean and Buddy, or are there people who will just feed their family?
Unfortunately, there's bad apples in every single bunch. And sometimes you get those recruiters that are just dead set in the tactics and in the recruiting methods that they learned, when the economy was a little bit different in the 90s and the early 2000s. And it's just, those are probably not companies that I would navigate away from. A biggest, hardest piece of advice is make your decisions from your abilities, not from your desperation. And I know it's hard when you're looking at scary things like not having money coming in. But if you think you're going to take a job in a toxic environment under the premise of you're going to still it just doesn't happen. And then you're in a worse headspace. You're in a worse situation. Like, it's always worse if you just make the decisions because you need a job. So if it doesn't feel right, ask a question. If you don't get answers that give you a warm fuzzy, it's probably not a spot you want to go.
Right. On the flip side of that, because I agree 100%, if you are on this side of it and you are the young applicant, and you get a bad feeling from a person, that's one person, and a company is a lot of people. And I know I'm going to get so much slack for this, but like you can't judge a book always by its cover, right? Like we said earlier, and that can go either way. But you also can't judge an entire group of people by one or two people that you meet. Now you can, if people are allowing them to do those things. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, but that has real-time consequences, right? Because one or two people can affect things for you. And so
they can.
Yeah. So what have you ever like just said, hey, baby, this is not the role for you. Maybe look over here. Have you sent people to have you sent people to other recruiters because you thought, you know what, that person, they have a job. I saw on LinkedIn, they have something that might be good for them?
Absolutely. So yeah, at the end of the day, my value system is I'm going to help you if I can. Whether or not that helps me is, I'm a firm believer in karma. So I know whatever I put out is going to put back. And yeah, I mean, it's uncomfortable and it puts me in a space that I don't love to be in. So when I start having a conversation, find out the candidate just really isn't ready for that role, then I will very politely take a left-hand turn and start asking very difficult, overwhelming questions And when they don't have a response, I'll just go, okay, well, thank you. It's sometimes these comes with experiences, and
Right.
maybe you haven't encountered that. And then I'll hit them with another one. And then, if they can't get through that, I'll hit them with a third. And then you can almost feel that they are like, this isn't for me. And that's when I'll turn it and go, you know what? Thank you so much for your transparency. I would never want to set you up for a position that's not. Sometimes it can be right company, wrong role, wrong time,
Yeah.
right, right time, wrong company. So, that is my job, to not waste anybody's time.
I like that. I have. So speaking of that, when people are applying, I want to circle back to earlier. There are some awkward questions for people like me. Some companies want to know, like I've had companies on applications that I've seen and where I've been on your side, that'll ask like your gender. A lot of the companies, if you Google it, they have 3. They have male, female, choose not to say.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are in transition for a very long time. If you're a trans person, what do you put there? And I mean, it's almost like, to me, I don't like the race question. Like, why do I have to go through all of these races and tell you that I'm white, non-Hispanic?
Right. Yeah.
And
Or
so why, if
white,
I will,
not of European,
yeah,
descent, or
because
a lot of that goes into exactly what we were kind of touching on earlier, which is it's your recruiter's responsibility to make sure that they are sending over a diverse candidate slate.
that
And when
was
we talk about
honest.
that, yeah,
That was also honest. You can kind of check up on it to make sure that,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so being diverse is not just a skin color anymore. And so those are some of the ways that we're trying to incorporate those metrics into a space where it's not really been spelled out. There are some companies more on the West Coast, like if you're getting into Oregon, Washington State, even California, that question has about 9 different options.
Yeah.
Some of them I haven't, like MX was one that just came across my desk the other day. And
What's
I
that?
had to go, I was like, what is MX? Non-binary. So they don't identify as a Mr. or a
My pug
Mrs.
doesn't like that. You hear that? He barked.
Or maybe he supports.
Or, yeah, maybe he's an ally.
Yeah, ally for the non-binary. So MX
Is there
is
anything
just,
that you could click there that would knock you out of it?
no. So all of that, those self-disclosures are, and some companies weight these jobs. Like if they know that they're looking, like they need a diversity hire for this role, they're looking for a person of color, or, a person that identifies with a different community, or a cisgendered person, or sometimes, like when I was working with Disney in the costuming department, a diversity hire for the costuming department was a man, because it was a woman centered. Same with the gardening.
that
It's
makes sense.
majority women. So when we talk about diversity, it's not just, oh my God, we're going against white men, or oh my God, we're going against persons of color. So diversity is so broad. So if I know that this job needs a person of color and a man, I'm going to put that into, that requirement. So if you select that, it's going to kind of rate you higher because they know that's what I'm looking for.
What do you
It's
think
not
about?
going to,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not going to disqualify any other race. It's just going to make sure that you kind of get in that bracket to get in front of that recruiter.
Do you hear this dog? It's like,
No, I don't. I think I'm talking.
he's like, Mommy, I didn't get my evening walk, is what he's saying.
Oh,
But what do you think about on your resume? At a certain point, like you want to be proud, you want to do all these things. I'm a very proud person. On all my descriptions, I'm doing this. I started a thing called Proudcast. So I'm out there, right?
Yeah.
What do you suggest though? Like on a typical person that just wants to coexist, which
Right.
I totally respect. I mean, straight cisgender people don't put at the top of their resume that they're straight cisgender people, but they're
Right.
also they're not a persecuted class. And so what do you like to see at those things?
So if a lot of the things that and I even look for and I love as a diversity and inclusion representative is under those accomplishments, instead of just focusing solely on your professional career and your professional accomplishments. And some people may have it, at the higher levels, but if you're the management levels, but if we're talking about, hourly staff, supervisor staff, or that early entry, they may not have some of those professional accomplishments. But just, do you volunteer? Have you done an HHS Pride? So put volunteer HHS or volunteer Trevor Project, volunteer.
And stick to your accomplishments, like you say.
Absolutely. So that's your way of really introducing yourself as aligning. Or if you're on the phone with the recruiter and you have it's that vibe and you're picking up on it, use the words, my partner and I, my family and I, introduce it like that. If you're comfortable to, but don't feel like you have to, because you do not. The only time you have to bring it up is if your driver's license and your legal requirements are not matching what you currently are projecting to yourself. That conversation doesn't even need to happen until after the offer has been given and accepted.
Until you're ready to do the paperwork. It doesn't matter up until then.
And it doesn't even need to go to the managers. That can happen through your recruiter and your HR onboarding representative.
The weirdest question that I've seen is, and then Ryan, I left this up because I want to get to this one, and we are. The biggest question or the weirdest thing that I've seen though, is when it asks you your sexual orientation. And so it already asked your gender, it asked your race, but now it wants to know. That's just so complicated. And why is that anybody's business? I'm just going to be blunt, who you sleep with is not my business, right? As long as it's legal, that is not my business. And even then, that's the law and your God. And then you go like, I just butchered what I'm thinking there, but
I think I'm following.
Yeah. So why is that even on there? Why does that matter? Because it's so hard to explain.
It's very hard to explain. And the majority of the people that you work with are not looking at that information. They don't even have, it's really only going to your recruiter and the federal government. So they get those statistics on when we get all of these statistics that you were showing earlier of pay margin gaps and all of this. Those are directly going into, so the numbers are skewed probably on to a lower amount because of everybody clicking, I don't want to identify. I'm not comfortable enough to tell you that much about me before I even get in front of you, because I feel like I might not even get in front of you.
I'm comfortable with it. What I'm like is, do they even understand? Because it can look weird. Like, I'm a trans woman and I identify as straight because I date like I don't want to have to explain that to a recruiter. I don't want to have to explain that to anybody. So I don't like that question on there, but I get it.
It's a murky question, right? Just by the simple way that that's what we were talking about earlier. There's biases written into the non-biased stuff. So you need that human contact. You need that interaction. Be your authentic self. Honestly, when I got on my first couple of conference with you, Allison, I had no idea that you were trans. I didn't know. You don't, so if I
interviewed you didn't look at my Facebook. I thought you said to do your research. You said to do your research.
Learning. Yeah, I had not done my research yet. But it's just some of those things. Like, nobody, if it's something that you want to make known because that's what you're comfortable with, and you want to make sure that everybody knows, so that if those red flags are going to fly, they should fly sooner rather than later. But again, don't go for that shock value, because that's a different issue, and it's got nothing to do with how you identify. Men, women, people go for the shock value all the time.
I don't need to go for a shock value. And but I get what you're saying, because earlier I totally do. Ryan's question here is pretty, like, we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, but not in this form. and it makes me kind of sad, but I'm going to read it. And it's he does have a question. I just started this new job, and I'm a bit worried that me going through my transitioning is if once I start dressing and looking more like a woman, will I lose my job? Now, Ryan, before Ashleigh goes, I'm gonna take part of this one because I have done this. Literally. I don't know the answer to that. I know that you should not lose your job. I know that legally you are a protected class there. But if you were watching earlier, hate doesn't always say it's hate. Discrimination doesn't always say it's discrimination. There are things. And so to Ashleigh's point a few times in this, to really go on your merits, go on your accomplishments, make sure that you are solid and make sure that you keep all of that you don't just know that you're solid, that you have documentation, that you have proof that you're solid. The overwhelming majority of people want you to succeed. They want you to be happy. If a dress makes you happy, they want you to be happy. I mean, let's make it that simple. They are just not the loudest people. They are not the Yelp reviewers. They are not the Glassdoor reviewers. And so you just always have to protect your happiness. Viola Davis was on TV just yesterday, and it was on YouTube or something. And she said that she didn't learn this when she was younger, but now she teaches it to her daughter, is that you are your only priority.
Yes.
That sounds selfish, but God, that hit me like a ton of bricks yesterday, because I was like, wow, whoa, what if I had been my only priority when I was 20 at the Dairy Queen? I'm sorry, 16 at the Dairy Queen, 20 at the Target. Like, what if I had not tried? Yeah. And so protect yourself. And I'll pass that one to Ashleigh. Sorry, Ashleigh.
Yeah. So my very first, I got a couple questions. He said he just started.
Yeah, he did.
And so, or just started the job?
She just started. And that's my fault. No, that's my fault, because I said he. And she just started. So she's at that level. She's asking, she gets on some of our other lives, and she has questions about hair, about transition. It's an exciting time for her.
It is.
Yeah. But
terrifying.
This is scary.
Yeah.
So help us, Ashleigh. Help.
So yes, expert level communication, but not just what you're saying it, focus it on how you're saying it. Be open to their feedback. And, that might be hard. It's hard to hear feedback about ourselves in any capacity when we're in such a vulnerable spot ourselves.
100%.
It can seem very heavy. Take it good out of it, even if it's shrouded in some maybe not so awful. But I would say, if you're seeing it from your supervisor, if you don't have your support of your supervisors, I would probably really consider already putting your feelers out for a new position, because it's just going to make an uphill battle for you. Unless that's something you're an advocate for, like that's a fight that you're willing to fight, because some days it's going to feel like a fight. And you're going to be going through a lot, and so tell them, this is my plan. This is what I'm doing. How, I want to know how that's going to impact you. What kind of, do you have concerns? Do you have questions, and sometimes people may not even know, like, okay, Allison, does becoming a trans woman just mean you're putting on a dress and growing out your hair and your nails?
It just depends on who you are. Well, it depends on who you are, right?
Right. So
some people offer no surgery. Some people have no medications.
Right. So those medications, those surgeries, those come along with things that, you need to have your, not that you have to have their support, because you don't. You'll have, your paid time off, and you'll be able to do that. But it's just going to be a conversation that you're going to have. But if you're not taking medications, then maybe they're scared. Are you going to be very emotional? Are you going to have a conversation? You're just going to start crying? Well, probably, maybe, and I challenge them. at any manager's level, tell me a woman that you haven't had a difficult conversation with where she hadn't cried. Those are things that we do when your body is flooded with hormones and you don't know what to do.
I
Whether
can
you
tell
were
you
born a woman or
for a good
becoming
year
a
and a
woman.
half, I cried all, like you could say hi and I'd be, oh my God, I'm so
I
happy.
know.
I'm cry
Yes.
happy.
You go, oh my God, Ashleigh, your hair's laying beautiful today. And I'm like, oh, do you think so? Because I was really struggling.
I loved your answer. And I always think you're so smart. Ryan, I'm so excited for you and your journey and some of these things. And just like over the last week on like this is like the third or fourth podcast that you've been on. And I respect that you are out there and you're asking these questions because that's helping other people. And I think that's important. What I would say about your workplace too is Ashleigh hit a good point. If it's hard to take things when people are giving them to us, if we're constantly beat down, if you're constantly beat down and we're constantly like marginalized, then when somebody gives us their feedback and it's constructive, it can seem like it is just another person beating us down. And it is not always that way. And now this is not Allison sitting here saying, well, this is corporate Allison trying to defend it, because some people are assholes. I'm just going to say it. Right? I can say it. Some people are not for you. What you really have to do there to protect yourself, like Ashleigh said, have your accomplishments. Look to see if that's the experience that other people are having. Don't go ask them. Look, make sure. And so I think that's one reason that it's very important that companies have metrics that hey, these are your KPIs. This is what we judge everybody on. Okay, well, I was on the same level with this person, but this person is not getting this retribution as me. And so that is something that unfortunately straight cisgender people typically don't have to worry about.
No.
Typically. I mean, they do, but they don't. You will always have to worry about that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And so you have to protect that because you are responsible for your happiness. And so always, always, always don't give excuses to people who do not deserve them, but also do not throw people into a category that do not deserve it. And so my favorite thing to say is before you get offended, ask if you should be offended. Look to see if you should be offended, because Lord, I could offend a million people. And like sometimes the way I talk as a Texan, you wouldn't even know that I was a liberal. And sometimes the way I talk as a liberal, you wouldn't even know that I see certain things. And so like just always, you can't ever judge a book just by one thing that they say or one interaction.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's totally true. And again, if you don't feel like you can be your full authentic self, it's always going to feel like something's missing. It's always going to feel like something's not completed, something's not being fulfilled because you're not being allowed to you're living two lives, and it's not sustainable. It's just not. And we can grow. We can learn as a country, as a culture. I fully believe that. We came up with the single most popular inclusive pronoun, like in the English language, like y'all, like it's my favorite word. Hey, y'all. So we can do it. Like, I know we have the capacity to progress. And it just
I've never thought of that. I have never thought of that. And so, wow, I like that.
Right. So, we can do it, and I'm here for it. And, I think it's the conversations, just coming to the conversation, as an ally or as a manager or as an employee, just being willing to go into that uncomfortable space and seeing if they're willing to meet you in it. Because if they're coming into that to meet you in there, then they're willing to learn and have a conversation. So try to be willing to teach and, educate them. And this is what my transition is going to look like for me. Here's how I feel like it's going to look for you. How do you feel? What are your thoughts?
Right. And if you are the employer, give some dang leeway. Like you can't, if they give you this master plan, who doesn't change their, like things change. They don't know how they're going to be affected by those pills. They don't know. Like, my gosh, the only time I've ever been insecure in my life probably actually was like the first year of transition, because it just affects you so differently. And like, how would I have known that? How would you know that? And so give some leeway to those things. But it is important to know who works for you, and it's important to know who you work for, because business is not personal. It is personal. You need
Mm-hmm.
to know because people have stuff going on in their lives. I hate that whole drop your things at the door. Like, who the hell
No,
could do
no, that's a thing of the past as well. Like, employees show up for their managers. They can, most places I can go, I like my job, but after 6-8 months max, I can have another one. I really can. And just like if I were hit by a bus tomorrow,
that?
couple
It's
months.
like a divorce for like I've always been, and I do that with relationships too. It's like, okay, we're dating. Okay, might as well move in on the first day because we are just going to be together. I can learn from you. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. So if anybody has any more questions, we had some emailed, and I'll get at those to Ashleigh, and she will answer those. I do want to say that part of Proudcast, I announced this week that there is a new kind of like blog coming out. I've already written some stuff for it over the last year and a half. I just had never put it in those categories, and had this amazing, cute name, which is called Life Translated. And so, whereas Proudcast is about the whole acronym, this is about the specific experiences, Ryan, that you would find, either funny or like, God, Allison, get it together. But that is something. And so it'll be coming out under the Proudcast thing. And I hope you enjoy it. But also, all the F word is never bad. I'm not scared of the F word, which is feedback. Always give your feedback on this Proudcast, unless you're one of those hate groups that loves to troll us. Sure, give it, but I don't care.
No.
So,
Keep on scrolling. This isn't for you.
after a vodka, I may have fun with you and just go back and forth, but for the most part, I don't care. And so, yeah, Ashleigh, I think you're amazing. Sean, if you're out there, and buddy, I didn't mean to take it away from you. You are still amazing. But Sean, I was his favorite interview. And so, Sean, thank you for that one huge lesson. You only taught me one thing, Sean, but that huge lesson. And yeah. And so thank you so much, Ashleigh. Don't be a stranger, and I'll get you those questions.
Absolutely not. Thank you. Yes, and feel free. I'm happy to help. I love it.
Yeah, apparently the pug loves you or hates you. I don't know which one, but we'll see.
We're going with love. We're keeping positivity over here.
See you later, alligator.
Bye.
Oh, Ashleigh, you have to stay on until it says you're uploaded.